Well, who warned you that leading through change would mean sitting across from somebody whose children are in mid-year of an international school and the visa expires in 60 days after the badge stops working, and that someone's partner relocated and left their job back home? You were asked to say absolutely nothing until the letter arrives. Who trained you for this conversation? Who even asked if you were okay with it? Nobody. In every merger and acquisition, there's a moment, let's say about week 3, where the line manager becomes the human shield between the corporate decision and real human consequence. You didn't make the decision. You weren't even in the room. You found out on a Tuesday afternoon call. But on Wednesday morning, your team is looking at you like you have all the answers. And you have nothing because you've been told to say nothing. Now, that's not leadership. That's an impossible position. And today, we're talking about it. Hi, my name is Tanja. Today, I'm talking directly to HR professionals, people managers, and mobility teams who are handed merger and acquisition decisions to execute humanely, legally, quickly, with little warning and support. I'll be sharing a composite story about Sophie, a line manager who did everything by the book and still watched it all unfold. I will also include 3 points companies need to change so managers like the Sophies aren't left alone in the dark. Stay on here if you've ever been the person expected to deliver hard, difficult, almost impossible news you had no part in creating. Now, here's something nobody says out loud in a merger and acquisition. The people responsible for executing the human side of integration, HR, line managers, mobility professionals, you're almost always, yes, the last to know and the first to expect to perform. That's nuts. The deal team spends 6 months in due diligence. Legal spends months on contracts, and finance goes through every synergy scenario. And that takes also a lot of time. But guess what? HR gets looped in weeks before announcement, sometimes even days. Mobility teams, they often get termination letters once everything's been drafted and done. What about the line managers, the ones who are right there every day, daily with their teams? You find out on a call. Then it is expected to manage team anxiety, answer questions you cannot answer, and conduct termination conversation you were never trained for. That's not people strategy. That's a pressure transfer. Now, there's a reason for M&A confidentiality. There are sensitive markets, deals can fall through. I get it. But here's what confidentiality costs at the human level. Your best people, the ones with the most options, they sense the shift before the announcement. They start networking. They take talks and calls they wouldn't normally do. They begin with quiet exits. Now, meanwhile, your line managers are sitting in team meetings watching this happen, unable to say absolutely nothing, feeling complicit in something that doesn't feel right. And your globally mobile employees, they're doing the math. They're pretty smart about this. They know what a change in ownership could mean for their visa, their housing allowance, for whether they're going home before their kids finish the school year. Confidentiality protects the deal, but the silence is costing your people. Now, and this gets even more complex the moment you have internationally mobile employees in the mix. Because for an expat on a company-sponsored visa, your role is being eliminated doesn't just mean updating a LinkedIn profile like it would be for a local employee. It triggers a clock. It's a legal countdown with immigration authorities, tax obligations that do not end at termination. They begin almost, I would say, at that point. Repatriation clauses that may or may not be honored. Family infrastructure that was built around the job that just no longer exists. Most HR teams aren't equipped for this. Most managers have no idea it's even their problem to deal with. Now, let me tell you about Sophie. It's a composite story with real situations that I've been putting together. Sophie was a regional manager at a mid-sized company, overseeing a team of 11 people across France, Netherlands, and Singapore. One of her direct reports, let's call him Kai, had relocated with his family from Singapore to Amsterdam 18 months ago on a company-sponsored visa as a part of a strategic expansion push. 2 months after her company announced an acquisition, Sophie got the famous Tuesday afternoon call. The HR business partner was calm and professional. Sophie, they say, we need to begin the role evaluation process for your team. I'm sending you a list. These conversations need to happen by the end of fortnight. Please keep this confidential until the letters go out. And guess what? Kai was on the list. Sophie knew 3 things immediately that the Excel spreadsheet that she was holding in her hands did not. Kai's kids were in month 4 in school, in the Dutch academic school. His wife left her job in Singapore to make the move. And his visa, the one that let his family stay in Amsterdam legally, it was tied to his employment contract. Now, Sophie asked, does anyone know about this visa situation? The answer was, well, that's something global mobility will sort out post-decision. Post-decision? Oh my, Sophie spent the next week in an impossible position. Do you think she got any sleep? No. She had her regular one-to-one with Kai on Thursday. He asked her directly, Sophie, should I be worried? Really worried. I'm hearing things. This was a tough one for her. She was instructed to say absolutely nothing. So she said, there are uncertain times for everyone. I encourage you to focus on your current projects. And as she was saying this, she was hating herself for it. Her team could feel something was wrong. The Amsterdam office was quieter than usual. Someone had seen an organization chart on a spreadsheet in a shared drive that shouldn't have been accessible. But it was. Because no one was saying anything, guess what? Rumors started to spread. And guess what? Sophie escalated 2 times. She flagged Kai's visa situation in writing to the HR. She also asked Global Mobility to be looped in before the decision was finalized. Both times, you know what she was told? Thanks, we've got it. We're working on it. On Friday, Kai received his letter. Here is what happened in the 30 days that followed. The part nobody planned for. Week 1, Kai's visa lawyer confirmed what Sophie feared the most. His work authorization had a 60-day wind-down clock for termination. The family had 2 months to either find a new job or a sponsor for the job or begin repatriation to Singapore. Kai's kids were in the middle of a school year. The international school back in Singapore had a waiting list. Re-enrollment mid-year, complicated. And also very traumatic for a 9 and a 12-year-old who had just started getting adjusted and learning Dutch. Week 2, the severance package arrived. It had been calculated against Dutch employment law, which is technically correct, but nothing for the tax equalization agreement that Kai had signed when he relocated. There was a discrepancy, and a big one. It went to legal. Legal said it would take at least 3 to 4 weeks to resolve. Kai was now managing a visa clock, a school crisis, a housing question. Their apartment lease was tied to company relocation allowance and an unresolved severance package. All of this at the same time. During week 3, Sophie found out that through Kai's farewell message to the team, he didn't blame her. He actually thanked her. And that somehow that made her feel worse. She reported to her own manager that the situation had been mishandled. She was told, you know what, these things are never perfect in a merger and acquisition. We appreciate your resilience. Week 4, 2 other globally mobile members on Sophie's team, people who had watched all of this on the sidelines, they quietly began exploring other opportunities, not because their roles were at risk, but because they seen how the company treated when things got complicated. They were not leaving because of the acquisition. They were not even on the list. They were leaving because of what they learned about how the company values people when the pressure is on. Now, let's count what this actually cost. Legal exposure from the tax equalization miscalculation that still begins negotiated months later. Emergency housing support that wasn't budgeted because nobody anticipated the lease allowance complication. The third point is 2 people who left voluntarily from high because of replacement costs, recruitment fees, and onboarding times. These are costs, real costs. And Sophie, a strong, experienced manager who did everything by the book, she started updating her own LinkedIn profile. Not because of the acquisition, once again, these things happen, but because she realized the company saw her as an execution mechanism, not a person who needs support to do an impossible job. The real cost wasn't in any integration budget. It was in the managers and talent you lost because they watched how you handled the hard moments. Now, Sophie's story is not unusual. The details change, but the pattern doesn't. Here's what needs to be changed. Change number 1, loop HR and mobility in a lot earlier. When HR finds out weeks before announcement, they're in crisis mode. When global mobility finds out after decision has been made, they're managing legal exposure that could have been avoided. Now, what can be done is to bring a small senior HR and mobility team into due diligence under NDA at the same stage as legal and finance that are involved during 6 months and doing their different studies. Ask them who has the international mobility agreements? What are the visa implications affected across the countries where the employees are coming from? And what termination triggers repatriation obligation? These are not soft questions, guys. These are legal and financial risk questions. They deserve the same seat at the table. The ROI here is that you avoid tax equalization surprises. You avoid the visa clock crisis. You give HR enough time and runway to design a humane process instead of executing a chaotic one. So, change number 2, give line managers a script and a permission to use it. The reality is that Sophie was handed a list, a deadline, and a big red post-it saying, keep it confidential. No language for how to hold space, safe space for her team without lying. That's horrible. No support for what it would feel like to look Kai in the eye on Thursday. Now, that's not a Sophie failure, that's a system failure. What can be done? Before the departure, line managers need 3 things. Clear language, not just keep it confidential, but here's what you can say when your team asks you direct questions. Second point is a point of contact. One person in HR they can call, not a ticketing system but a human being for those questions that line managers cannot answer. And third point, acknowledgement. Just saying, we know this is hard. We are not leaving you alone with it. We are in this together. The ROI of this, managers who feel supported will execute this with more humanity, with more ease, and they will stay longer. They will see that this change, this acquisition or merger is normal, is fine, but we have to go through it together. It's not a hot potato. They become your integration ambassadors instead of your quiet departures. Change number 3. Treat expat offboarding as its own process. The reality is that most companies handle expat termination through the same process as everyone else, a footnote with check with mobility. Other than that, it's offboarding like a local employee. That footnote is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Expat offboarding is not a footnote. It's a separate work stream with legal, tax, immigration, housing, schooling, family dimensions across multiple countries at the same time. What can be done? Create a dedicated expat offboarding process with a checklist that starts the moment a global mobile employee appears on that affected list before the decision is finalized. Before the decision is finalized, please. What to include? What is the visa wind down time, the tax equalization audit, repatriation clause review, housing and schooling impact assessment, and also family communication plan. As you can tell here, we're talking about pre-decision, pre-planning, not post-decision. So decision makers actually understand what they're deciding. And what happens when you do this? You reduce legal exposure. You protect your I can't pronounce it. Reputation, your company reputation in global talent markets. You give internationally mobile employees and their families the dignity of a planned transition rather than a scramble. So, in summary, I've said a lot here, but in summary, Sophie did everything right. She flagged the issues. She showed up for her team. She tried to protect someone whose life was more complicated than an Excel spreadsheet could identify. The system didn't support her, and that's the real story of a merger and acquisition for the people who execute it. Not the deal closing, not the synergy projections. What happens to the Sophies, the managers in the middle, the ones who are having that tough decision, and what they learn about their company in the process. Here's what I want you to take away today. For HR leaders, you cannot do your job well if you're the last to know. Push for early inclusion, frame it as a legal and financial risk management, because you know what? It is. Line managers, what you're being asked to do in an M&A is genuinely hard, if not impossible. Your discomfort is not a weakness, it's information. And it deserves to be named and supported. And for mobility professionals, your expertise is not an afterthought when everything is finished and you're brooming up the place. No, the companies that treat it as one will pay for it in legal cost, talent loss, and especially reputation. You know this, and keep on saying it, keep on repeating it. Now, if you've been Sophie or if you've had a Sophie in your team, I'd love to hear from you. These stories need to be told and not being hidden behind closed doors. Because the more we name what's actually happening to the people who execute these mergers and acquisitions, the more we can build systems that don't leave them alone with the impossible. Thank you for being here for TP Talks, Working Global. Until next time, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for